The Xyla of Xylos prided themselves on logic. Their cities were gleaming testaments to efficiency, built with angles so precise they seemed to cut the very air. Their society operated like a perfectly calibrated machine, every citizen a cog, every action driven by data and undeniable reason. Emotions, to the Xyla, were messy variables, inconvenient statistical outliers in the grand equation of existence. And of all the illogical behaviors exhibited by the younger species of the galaxy, humanity's peculiar attachment to its pets was perhaps the most baffling. High Analyst Krelix, a Xyla whose crystalline mind processed information with flawless precision, had studied the human phenomenon extensively through remote observation and data packets. Primitive emotional baggage, Krelix had concluded in a widely circulated report. The human-animal bond, as they term it, represents a significant misallocation of resources, food, shelter, medical care, even emotional energy, all lavished upon non-sapient, often short-lived biologicals. It is a clear indicator of a species yet to achieve true operational maturity. The Xylo conclave had concurred. Humans were interesting, perhaps, in a detached, anthropological way, but their sentimentality rendered them largely irrelevant on the galactic stage of serious, logical civilizations. Then came the creeping fade on Xylos. It began subtly, a strange wilting in the hydroponic farms that supplied the Xylo with their nutrient paste, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in the complex ecosystems they had so carefully engineered. Krelix, tasked with leading the Planetary Health Division, initially categorized these as minor system fluctuations. Xylo technology was supreme. Their sensors could detect molecular shifts, predict atmospheric changes to the millionth decimal, and model any biological process with cold, hard data. But the fade did not yield to logic. It spread. The meticulously cultivated flora turned gray and brittle, crumbling to dust. The bioengineered fauna, designed for optimal protein conversion, grew listless and sick. Soon, even the crystalline structures of their cities seemed to lose their luster, a fine, almost invisible particulate haze clinging to their surfaces. The Xylo sensors, for all their sophistication, struggled. The causative agent was a microorganism, that much they knew, but it mutated with terrifying speed, its markers shifting before their analytical engines could lock onto them. Containment protocols, designed with impeccable logic, failed one after another. Each new defensive strategy was met by a new, unforeseen adaptation from the fade. Panic, an emotion the Xyla had long prided themselves on transcending, began to whisper through their networked consciousness. Xylos, their perfect world, was dying, and their logic was powerless to stop it. Desperate transmissions went out to the Galactic Concord, detailing their plight, requesting any data, any assistance. Most replies were sympathetic, but offered little of practical value. Then, a message arrived from the human delegation. It was polite, concise, and utterly perplexing. They offered assistance, claiming to possess specialized biological detection units that might be effective. The Xyla High Council debated the offer. Biological detection units, scoffed Councillor Thren. Are they referring to their own primitive senses? What can these emotionally driven bipeds offer that our most advanced genomic sequencers and atmospheric analyzers have not? Krelix, usually the first to dismiss such unquantifiable proposals, felt a sliver of something unfamiliar, desperation. Counselor, Krelix stated, its voice flat but firm, our current methodologies are proving insufficient. The rate of mutation in the fade organism outpaces our predictive algorithms, while the human proposal lacks conventional scientific rigor. To dismiss any potential avenue of investigation at this juncture would be illogical. The word illogical, when applied to not trying something, swayed the council. Permission was grudgingly granted. The human ship that arrived was small, almost comically so compared to the sleek Xylo cruisers. It was functional, clearly, but lacked any of the aesthetic precision the Xylo valued. Out stepped a handful of humans, clad in simple, practical jumpsuits, and with them, on leashes, came the biological detection units. There were 4 of them. One was a glossy black creature with floppy ears and an ever-wagging tail, what the humans called a Labrador retriever. Another was a sturdy, alert animal with pointed ears and intelligent eyes, a German shepherd. Two smaller, tricolored beings with long, drooping ears and mournful expressions completed the quartet. Beagles, the lead human, a calm woman named Dr. Eris Thorne, explained. Krelix observed the scene from a shielded observation deck, its multifaceted eyes taking in every detail. Animals. They had brought common, domesticated animals. The sheer absurdity of it was almost offensive. Were the humans mocking them in their hour of need? Beside Krelix, other Xylar scientists exchanged glances that communicated pure, unadulterated skepticism. "These are our primary biodetection assets," Dr. Thorne said, her voice amplified to the observation deck. She gestured to the Labrador, who was now sniffing intently at her boots, tail thumping a happy rhythm against the sterile landing pad. "This is Buster. He, along with Pip, Mary, and Shadow here, are trained to detect specific organic compounds and microbial signatures through olfaction." "Olfaction," Krelix transmitted, the single word dripping with disdain. "You propose to combat a hypermutative pathogen with smell." "Precisely," Dr. Thorne replied, unfazed. "Their olfactory capabilities are orders of magnitude more sensitive than any artificial sensor we've ever developed for this kind of work. They can detect volatile organic compounds in parts per trillion, even quadrillion, and they can adapt to new scent profiles much faster than we can reprogram a machine." A test was arranged. A sealed sector of a failing hydroponics facility, Sector Gamma 7, was chosen. Xylar sensors indicated moderate, evenly distributed contamination. The humans, with their canines, were allowed entry. Krelix and its team monitored every data point, every vital sign, every twitch of the Xylar sensors. The dogs were released from their leashes. For a moment, they simply explored, noses to the ground, tails moving with an energy that seemed alien in the sterile, dying environment. Then Buster, the Labrador, suddenly froze, one paw lifted, nose quivering towards a specific ventilation shaft the Xylar had deemed clear. He let out a soft woof. His handler, a young man, knelt beside him, murmuring praise and offering a small treat. "Good boy, Buster, show me." Buster led them directly to the shaft. Dr. Thorne took a handheld scanner, a human device, Krelix noted with some contempt, and waved it over the area. "Significant concentration here," she announced. "Much higher than ambient levels." Krelix checked its own readouts for that specific point. Nothing. Or rather, levels so low they were well within acceptable background noise. "Our sensors detect nothing anomalous at those coordinates, human Thorne," Krelix stated. "That's because your sensors are looking for what you expect to find based on previous data," Thorne replied calmly. "Buster is smelling what is there, right now. This strain might be new or concentrating in a way your models haven't predicted." To prove her point, Thorne requested a physical sample be taken from the shaft. Reluctantly, Krelix authorized a remote drone to collect it. The analysis came back. A new, highly aggressive variant of the Fade organism, one their systems hadn't even catalogued yet. It was thriving, hidden, in a place their logic had dismissed as safe. The Xylar scientists in the observation deck were silent. The data was irrefutable. An animal, a pet, had outperformed their most sophisticated technology. But it didn't stop there. Pip and Mary, the beagles, began working in tandem, their melodious bays echoing strangely in the doomed facility. They moved with a focused intensity, quartering the ground, their noses working like tireless pistons. They identified not just infected zones, but seemed to differentiate between them. One handler explained, "Pip is alerting to early-stage infections, the faint, initial colonization. Mary is better at pinpointing the mature, heavily sporulating areas." Shadow, the German shepherd, was different again. It moved with a quiet, intense focus, often pausing, head cocked, as if listening to something the Xylar could not perceive. Its handler explained that Shadow was trained to detect subtle changes in air currents and particle distribution that often preceded a new outbreak or indicated hidden reservoirs of the pathogen. The most stunning moment came when Shadow suddenly veered off, whining softly, and began pawing urgently at a seemingly blank wall panel. "Impossible," one of Krelix's subordinates muttered. "That section is triple shielded, recently sterilized. Contamination cannot exist there." Dr. Thorne nodded to Shadow's handler. "Trust your dog." The handler spoke to Shadow in soft, encouraging tones. The dog intensified its efforts, scratching more insistently. Reluctantly, Krelix ordered the panel removed. Behind it was a narrow, forgotten maintenance conduit, not on any of the current schematics. And it was choked, absolutely choked, with a viscous, pulsating variant of the Fade, black and virulent. It was a mother lode, a primary breeding ground their logic had never conceived of, because the conduit itself was an error in their perfect system, a forgotten detail. If it had remained undiscovered, it would have reinfected the entire facility within days, undoing any cleansing efforts. On the observation deck, Krelix felt its crystalline thought processes fracture. This wasn't just superior detection. This was something else. The handlers weren't merely controlling the animals. They were communicating, a seamless flow of information passing between human and canine through gesture, tone, and an unspoken understanding Krelix couldn't quantify. The dogs weren't just tools. They were partners, driven by something beyond simple programming. They worked with an enthusiasm, a joy almost, that was profoundly alien to the Xylo way. "How?" Krelix finally transmitted, the single word devoid of its usual certainty. "Your species has co-evolved with these canids for tens of thousands of years," Dr. Thorne explained, her voice gentle. "We didn't just tame them, we grew alongside them. Their senses became an extension of ours, and ours of theirs. This bond, this partnership, is built on generations of mutual trust, affection, and shared purpose. We train them using positive reinforcement, play, food, praise. Things your logic might dismiss as emotional," she smiled faintly. "But for them, it's the most powerful motivator in the universe. They want to please us. They want to work with us. Their desire to connect and cooperate is as deeply ingrained as their ability to smell." Krelix stared at the image of the young handler stroking Buster's head, the dog leaning into the touch with pure contentment after a successful find. Affection, Krelix processed. Emotional attachment as a force multiplier for operational efficiency. The concept was so foreign, so counter to everything the Xyler believed, that it was almost physically painful to contemplate. The primitive emotional baggage they had so readily dismissed was, in this context, a uniquely powerful, adaptive, and highly effective problem-solving mechanism. It was a biological supertool, forged in the fires of shared history and emotional connection that their cold logic could never hope to replicate. The Xyler had tried to create perfect systems, but humanity had cultivated perfect partnerships. Over the following weeks, the human-canine teams worked tirelessly. They mapped the Fade across Xylos, identifying its hidden strongholds, its mutation vectors, its subtle environmental triggers. They found it in places Xylo technology had declared sterile, sniffed out its presence in dormant stages Xylo sensors couldn't register. The Xylo scientists, humbled and increasingly awestruck, worked alongside them, using the dog's unparalleled detection to guide their own analytical tools, to develop targeted counteragents, to finally begin pushing the creeping Fade back. Hope, another illogical emotion, began to bloom on Xylos, as fragile and precious as the first new shoots in the recovering hydroponic farms. When the crisis was finally over, Krelix stood before the Xyler High Council. Its report was, for a Xyler, shockingly devoid of pure data and overwhelmingly focused on observational analysis of the human method. "We were wrong," Krelix stated, its voice resonating with a newfound and unsettling humility. "Our understanding of efficiency was incomplete. Our dismissal of emotional capacity as a weakness was a profound error in judgment. The humans, through what we termed primitive sentimentality, have cultivated a form of interspecies symbiotic partnership that surpasses our most advanced technological capabilities in specific, critical domains." Krelix paused, then delivered the core of its revelation. Their emotional baggage, as I once termed it, is not a flaw, it is a strength. A unique, potent, and perhaps terrifyingly adaptive tool. We saw pets. We should have seen co-evolutionary guardians. Impact on Xylo society was seismic. The word efficiency was suddenly open to reinterpretation. Logic, while still paramount, was no longer seen as the only path to understanding or problem-solving. Research initiatives were launched into emotional intelligence, symbiotic partnerships, and the neurobiology of interspecies cooperation. Xylo scientists began, awkwardly at first, to study the concept of trust, not as a contractual obligation, but as an emotional force. Across the galaxy, the story spread. Humanity, the sentimental primitives, became known by new names. The symbiotes, the beast masters, the keepers of the bond. Their ambassadors found themselves fielding curious, respectful inquiries from species that had previously dismissed them. Galactic policies began to shift, subtly at first, then more overtly, to include considerations for biological, co-evolutionary solutions to complex problems. Weeks later, Krelix found itself in a newly established xenobiological interaction zone on Xylos. Dr. Thorne and her team were preparing to depart, their mission complete. Buster, the Labrador, trotted over to Krelix, tail wagging, and nudged its multi-jointed leg with a wet nose. Krelix froze. Its programming screamed of potential contamination, of illogical physical contact. But then, Krelix remembered the sight of Buster fearlessly leading the way into the heart of the Fade, driven by nothing more than a human's encouraging word and the promise of a pat on the head. Slowly, hesitantly, Krelix extended a delicate, crystalline tendril and rested it, ever so lightly, on Buster's head. The dog leaned into the touch, emitting a soft, contented sigh. It was, Krelix registered, an entirely illogical sensation. And yet, for the first time, Krelix suspected that logic alone might not be enough to truly understand the universe.